So I've chosen a reference image just to kind of base off of as an interior of a house. And first thing you're going to do is get your horizon line. So I'm just going to sketch in lightly, and you pick a vanishing point somewhere along it. Say pretty much right in the middle of the paper. And that is where pretty much everything is going to be coming from in terms of your lines. All your lines will either be vertical, horizontal, or coming right from that vanishing point out towards you. So let's imagine that you are looking into a room, and the ceiling is going to be up here, floor here, and walls on either side. Now, this box I've drawn in is almost the outline of the picture, and everything that we draw is going to be inside the box. So, vanishing point here in the middle, and these lines are going to be where the wall and floor connect. So the wall is now bounded by this box, and basic idea being objects up closer will appear larger, objects further away will appear smaller. So this wall is the same height here and here, theoretically, but as you're looking at it, it diminishes and gets smaller as it gets further away. And once you've got the basic box shape of your room laid out, you can start adding some details. So in this case, there is going to be a ventilation pipe that runs up and down right here in the foreground. And it actually goes, its top and bottom are beyond our scope of view in this case. And something that I should be more careful of actually right now is making your initial lines very lightweight, because this pipe being in the foreground means that nothing is going to be in front of it. And none of the lines, you shouldn't be able to see any of the lines through it. Just going to add some indication that this is a round pipe. So, anything, since this is a cylinder, we can kind of draw in a little cross section here. The further down you go, the further away from this vanishing point, the taller or the more depth you'll be able to see in this cross section. Right here at the vanishing point, you will not be able to see either the bottom or the top of that cross section. It will merely be a flat line. Come up here, and maybe you're going to be able to see something around that as a circle. Somewhere in the middle, it's going to be a thinner circle. Because right here in the middle, you're not going to be able to see the top or bottom of everything. If we had a cube sitting here, then you cannot see the top or bottom, because if you're able to see the top, that would shift the vanishing point up here somewhere. If you were to have this cube and move it up here, now this is above the vanishing point, so you're going to be able to see the bottom of this cube. So this is the bottom face. This is the front face. Same thing goes for cylinders. You will be able to see none of the top or bottom of the cross section. It will be a flat line right here in the middle. in line with the vanishing point, and the further up you go, the wider that circle will become. So when I'm doing these little details on the pipe, up here there will be more curve, and here slightly less. And these curves will go up to follow the cross section when they're above the vanishing points. These ones will go down when they're below the vanishing point. Now, I'm going to add a couple of the windows along this side wall. A vertical line for the edge of one of the windows. Now, for the bottom edge of the window, follow straight back to your original vanishing point, right in the center, and come out this way. And for the top, same thing. Come out towards the viewpoint. An important thing to do whenever you're drawing is not just leave this as your window. There's no real indication that that's actually a window. The frame will be further out from the wall. So in order to indicate that, we need to have a front face here. So now the window frame appears to be out this way from the wall. Next, we can make the other faces of the frame. So that's one step in the right direction, but now, since this is one part of the frame, since this frame does have depth, as we illustrated here in the front, that depth also needs to be shown here. So you have horizontal lines going back into the frame, and vertical line showing that same depth that we showed on the front side, showing that it is not just a flat surface, a flat plane. And then these inside lines will again go back to the vanishing point. Another important thing that usually you don't want to start doing too early, but just for demonstration purposes, you can start shading things in. This is not necessarily realistic, as there would usually be light coming in through this window, so if you're doing realistic drawing, this face here might not be in shadow, but depending on the angle of the sun coming through the window, this could very well be in shadow here, and this as well. I'm going to shade in lightly, and that's just to really show that there actually is there are three dimensions going on here. Okay, next up, I'm just going to sketch in a couple of windows along the back wall. So if we want to have all of these windows have this be the same height up from the floor. So this is the corner of the wall and the floor, and this window is that far above the floor. Now, if we want to have windows on this back wall here, but that be that same height, remember that it's not just tracing from, say, this corner and going straight across, because it will actually be somewhere along this line going towards that vanishing point. The corner of our room is right here around the edge of the pipe. It's approximately there. So if we go back along towards the vanishing point, right to a corner of our wall, then this height will be the same in real life. Same with the top edge. That is going to be proportionally coming back to about here and then tracing that line so that this height up to the ceiling is about the same. Now that we have that done, we can kind of choose where our window frames will be going, and that doesn't particularly matter. Let's try and estimate how wide this window would be if we're looking at it straight on. So this window is going to appear narrower than it actually is because we're looking at it from an angle. If this window were translated onto this back wall, we're looking at it straight on, we can see that here it's around 3/4 of an inch across. And back here, this one is also, it's a little bit over 3/4 of an inch, getting closer to an inch, but it really should be wider. Let's make it a little bit over an inch and see how that looks. I think that looks a little bit more reasonable, saying that this is just as wide as this. Now let's make one more about the same width. And now we can draw in the frames. So now, since we've established in this that there is depth to these window frames, that will now be seen a little bit differently in these windows that are looking straight on compared to this one. We will now see these inside edges. On this one, we will see just a little bit going to that vanishing point. That line right there establishes depth. That is the corner. And then drawing these two lines in. It's a bit wide. Here. Now, why don't we see this same corner here? Well, our vanishing point is actually just on this side of the line, which means if we tried to trace this line back to our vanishing point as we did here, we did that here, then it would actually be behind this initial frame. We cannot see the depth along this edge as we can over here. And on the top and bottom, we can see it. And it is important to note that we'll be able to see a little bit more on this top than we will on the bottom, which means that this should be wider and this should be a little bit narrower. Same concept as I talked about with the cylinder, where it's simply because this point here, this face here, is further above or further away from the vanishing point than this is here. This distance bigger than this distance. Now, since we did add a couple more extra lines in here just to give some indication of a little bit more detail to the window rather than just a frame and a pane, you can add those in here, and these do not have to be very exact. They just add a little bit more to the drawing.